Well, thank you, Gav, for having me at your studio here at Biggs Pictures in Jamestown. I'm Matthew Blumeke, and this is the Alchemy of Remembrance.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad to have you on. You've gone through an amazing journey, and you've changed so much. We've all changed since high school. We've been friends. Yeah, we've been friends since grade 8, and there's been lots of changes. And so with the podcast, I always ask, how was your story? Where were you in grade 8, and where are you now? And what were the changes that happened throughout your life? So it's sort of a story that unfolds of Gav Biggs and how he came from a little boy into the man that he is now, who has created Biggs Pictures, which is a media company. You've done amazing work with creating videos. You started doing portrait shots now, and you're getting yourself out there, and you really have niched in on your skills of videography, and now starting to come in with photographs. And at the same time, you've been saying yes to so many different projects, creative projects. You've been helping a group of rappers with their music and their content, and I've seen some really good, not just the music side, but there's also been some comedy films and just other people creating and expressing themselves online. And you've been that person to share that for people, the medium for them to create and share online. So I just want to talk about how did it all begin, and let's start from there. Who is Gav Biggs?
Who is Gav Biggs? Okay, so it was interesting when you said, when you mentioned grade 8 and using that as a starting point. It's been a while since I've actually had to rack my brain and really think about my formative years in high school. I think that's mainly due to the fact that just my life has been so turbulent since I left school. In high school, I like to think that I was a reasonably well put together individual, and things in my life seemed pretty steady and pretty calm. The things that you mentioned are all true, and they're all very lovely accolades. One of the other things that's been a big part of my life and been really formative lately is my struggle with addiction. I am a recovering drug addict, and for me, I would say that is really, where, I don't want to say that's where my story begins now, but I would say at the moment I'm kind of going through a bit of a renaissance, or rather rebirth, trying to actually start to figure out who Gav Biggs is now. But I would call myself a creative, and I would call myself a person who I just love working with people. I love people's stories, and I get a lot of energy from being around people. That's where I draw my life force from. I'm an extrovert. But how did we get to this point? Sure. So we went to the same school, Somerset College. It was a upper class private school, and I would say that those years in Somerset College, I learned a lot. I became very informed, but I was also very naive in a way. And I think that's what kind of led to my stages of nihilism when I reached university. I think because I'd been given this good education, but I hadn't really been given too much to struggle against. I'd lived a pretty privileged life. I was in a bubble there in Somerset College. It was a beautiful school, very sheltered. And I think what that does is when you know too much but have earned too little. I think that's a very dangerous combination. But at school, I was like.
What would you say? What do you mean what do you mean know too much?
When I say know too much, I mean, okay, so there's this term, I don't know if you've heard it, taking the red pill. Red pills are basically pieces of information that you come across that completely change your perspective. And unfortunately, the red pill is something that usually has a negative connotation because it's almost a depressing truth that you learn. So by knowing too much and feeling too little, I became very disconnected with reality. I became, because I've always been one to party, and clearly now I'm unable to actually put a coherent story together, but that's just the way I think. I've always loved to party because of my extroversion and loving people. But it got to a point in university where, how do I put this? Where I would be so concerned with everything that's happening around the world that didn't affect me, that it really started to affect my life. And I think that's one of the problems in our generation is that we are inundated with so much information, but we've cast away traditional values, we've cast away a lot of religious practices, we've cast away the way that we interact as communities, and all that we've been given to fill that void is just an abundance of information. And unfortunately, it's also the I don't want to say worst information, but it's the most graphic and the most shocking information that kind of bubbles to the surface, because that's just how media works. So we've been given all the tools to know things about the world, but we don't have any tools to understand the world.
So your research led quite into a lot of politics and
bro.
And that was the biggest thing, where there was always a conflict of some kind of controversy or theories that people were talking about. There was the left-hand side and the right-hand side, and so there was a debate that was playing in your head all the time when you started to learn about the different things that you got yourself into.
Yeah, and I thought I was becoming informed, but in reality, I was really just becoming opinionated, because everyone's got an opinion.
Yes. Did you feel like you because you're learning all of these things and you started to form an opinion, was that a bit of an addiction to power? Because the more you know, the more you can tell someone else, no, this is actually how it is, and this is what it's all about.
Completely. I had a big chip on my shoulder. So during school, I was able to do well without having to try hard. I was able to get high 70s, low 80s without ever having to study. None of my orals I would prepare for. And what that did, it taught me that, well, first of all, I was unable to learn like a normal student, but it also taught me a learned arrogance that I've got this. So then when I left school, I decided to study law, and all of a sudden I just knew that I did not have this, but I knew that I was intelligent. So I've always had a big chip on my shoulder because I dropped out of law after a year and a half. I've always had this chip on my shoulder that people doubt my intelligence. And also I like to debate a lot. So learning about all these things and almost gathering this information, it wasn't even in a constructive or conducive way. It was gathering things in order so that I could be right.
Just keeping ammo for in case.
Keeping ammo, keeping ammo just in case, and just only researching one side of a topic or an opinion. And then I think I used that process to fill the void that I wasn't getting from studying. Because I was like, oh yeah, you can name, you got more in the law test than what I did, but I know more about politics.
Yes.
and I'm going to prove you wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get power that way, because knowledge is power. And yeah, so, and that coincided with a lot of partying. And again, it was a competitive nature that took control of the partying.
Okay.
It wasn't just I'm going to party. It's like I'm going to really party.
Yeah.
You know, no one's going to party harder than what I'm going to.
Yeah, and you'll still be on top at the end of the night.
I'll still be on top, you know.
Yeah.
It was that in itself was another addiction, because that became a big part of my identity.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that, you know,
people associated you as the party animal, you know.
the party animal who always has a controversial opinion.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So after a year and a half of law, I decided to drop out. And that's when I went into the film industry. I knew that studying just wasn't for me, so I got my first job in the film industry, working as a secretary for a producer. And one of the tasks eventually was she would give me scripts from people who had pitched movie ideas to her. And I would have to read this whole script, and I would have to give her a synopsis, and my synopsises of the scripts were so useful to her that she then said, okay, give me a synopsis, but also tell me if I should be interested in this movie.
Okay.
So then I started doing that for her. Then I got a job as a T-boy on my first movie set, which was a small, also adaptation of a French opera. And from there, I just kept getting the next job as a PA, next job in the film, next job. And things in my life started to come together again.
Yes.
Not only was I good at this whole, film industry thing, but it also suited my using lifestyle very well. There was this brief moment where I was able to be competent, and I was able to use a lot of substances at the same time.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's when I was kind of floating on this kind of pink cloud. And I did that for a year and a half, and I eventually became a second AD on another film shoot. And then I went back to studying, and I would have been third year to do my BA. And I just wanted to get a BA because I just, wanted to get a degree. My parents thought it was a good idea. So I went to go study my BA, and BA, I'll clap this.
Yeah.
No worries.
Yeah. Still with that attitude.
Still with that attitude, with no work ethic.
Yeah.
And I think a turning point for me, for the worse, in terms of studying for my BA, it's something so petty, but I was in an ancient cultures lecture, and we were talking about, the lecturer was talking about ancient Egypt.
Oh no.
Exactly.
I see where this is going.
So after the lecture is done, I thought, you know what, I'm going to be, and this is my idea of what a good student is, I'm going to go to the lecturer and I'm going to talk to him about Graham Hancock and his theories about how ancient cultures really started developing, because I'd actually done a lot of research into this.
So you're saying what you were taught in the class was completely different to what you were learning outside of
the class.
Okay. Yeah.
And I still believe that what I was learning outside of the class was actually better information.
Yes.
I went to go speak to him about Graham Hancock, and he dismissed him as a journalist. And I think that gave me an excuse just to say, fuck university.
Yeah.
I'm going to use the rest of my months in university to not have to study.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to fail, and I'm just going to party.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to think about anything. I'm just going to do as many drugs as I can and drink as much as I can and just live the good life, because I'm better than university.
Yeah.
I stopped blaming my parents. I was wrong. They were wrong about wanting me to get a degree. And now I'm the victim, and I get to start using again.
Okay.
So yeah, let me speed this up. So then that happened. And this is when my using started to get bad. I started moving on to harder drugs, to cocaine, methamphetamines. And socially, things were fine. But none of my friends knew that I was going through a heavy addiction cycle.
Yeah, because you're extroverted, so it's just you're just masking yourself from the world.
Exactly.
Yeah. So no one was the wiser.
No one was the wiser.
Yeah.
And those years, well, those months taught me how to hide my pain and numb myself.
Okay. Yeah. So further disconnecting you from the first part, where you started to disconnect yourself from the feelings and the information, knowing so much, and now you're further disconnecting yourself from your feelings with this behaviors.
Yeah, and the thing is that I knew how to process other people's emotions. I've always been a very good listener, but I had no idea what on earth I was feeling. Completely disconnected from my emotions. And I think that was, looking back, that was actually something really sad, being the life of the party, but being so depressed and sad on the inside. Having no self-esteem. And then I dropped out of college again. After that, I went back into the film industry, but this time my using was catching up to me. And I could not see things through, and things started just to slowly decay. Spiritually I started to slowly decay, until eventually I got booked into rehab. So there came a point where I came to the realization, because I tried to quit drugs many times, that I actually need professional help. So I first asked to go to rehab. And understandably, my family's initial reaction to that was, no, you must just try harder. Which I don't blame them for thinking that way. Because I was displaying a lot of toxic behaviors, which is hard to separate from the addiction. I was stealing from them. And while all this is also going on, I was also doing a lot of creative things. We tried to start a radio station. I had a podcast. I was still messing in videography. But eventually, they realized I needed to go to rehab, so I went. That would have been just over a year ago. Since then, I've really started to get my business going. I've been trying to eat healthier, and I've, for the first time, been able to learn things, to gather all this information about the world and incorporate it in a healthy way.
To contextualize it, put it into perspective.
Exactly, and not to become attached to it.
Yes.
I've been trying to find, a higher power, trying to reconnect myself with a higher power, being more open to ideas, being more honest with myself.
And you are doing those things.
Yeah.
You're not trying.
Yeah, I am doing those things. So addiction is very much at the forefront of my existence at the moment. But it's when, if I don't put my addiction at the forefront of my mind, I lose everything. There's a saying that my sponsor said to me, anything that you put ahead of your recovery, you're going to lose that.
I see.
So for me now, at the moment, I've come to realize that because I always try to help people, I love helping people, but if I can't help myself, if I can't love myself, then my love to other people is actually toxic. It's something that's a burden to them. And throughout all of this, over the past 2 years, I've been building a videography business, which has actually been going very well. I think I found my niche in videography. So what has made me who I am, I would say, is growing up, I always had a resentment that I never had a hard enough upbringing. I didn't have a struggle.
Yes.
I was so resentful about that.
You wanted that.
Yeah. Then all of a sudden, I get my struggle, and now I'm struggling, but in a good way.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah, so that's how I kind of got here. I mean, there's a whole lot of things I'm probably missing out on, but at the moment, I'm just all about trying to pitch up for myself every day, being honest with my emotions, being vulnerable. And I think 2020 for me is going to be the year about being intentional.
Yeah, we were speaking about that. Yeah. Okay. And so there's a lot to unpack with this story. And I want to say thank you very much for being open, vulnerable, speaking your truth. And that's what the Alchemy of Remembrance is all about, is being open, is being truthful and expressing who you are. So thank you for really diving into your story, giving a little picture, because that's the thing about a story of someone, is that it's never pretty. Even like you said, from the outside you were looking like you're the life of the party, everything was going well, everyone saw that your businesses were still growing, you were still doing creative things. No one would have known the wiser, because you were so, it was your whole life was a social media, right? It was it had a filter, and that's why I like to have this podcast and like to have you to share your story with such vulnerability, because now people can actually see that it's not so pretty, and it never is pretty for anyone else, and it's also okay to admit that. So there was a time when you were using, and when you were in that state where you weren't open to the things, and that was like your way of being okay in the world.
Yes.
But actually, once you started to admit and you started to open up, then things started to change for you. So I think it's also nice that people can see that it can be okay to say that you have a problem, or that there's something wrong in your life that you would like to change. And that's where it starts, right? So it started with you saying yes. So I want to know how did you come to that point, and how did it make you feel? Because admitting to your toxic behaviors, admitting to our toxic behaviors is probably the worst thing that anyone can do, because it's, I mean, we can always judge someone else. We can say, oh, that person's not doing it wrong with that person's, but it's always because there's something really wrong with us that we're not wanting to admit. So what was the turning, or like how did you decide, okay, I'm going to face my fears, I'm going to own it?
I still have to make that decision every day. It's a process. I mean, I think, with addiction, you hit a rock bottom.
Yeah.
A moment of true hopelessness. And that's, for most people, that's, the turning point. Whether they keep on the path of, trying to admit what their character defaults are or not, it's different to every person. But for me, the thing was, admitting you have a problem initially is easy. Admitting I've got an addiction problem, that's easy. What's hard is actually coming to face reality of just how far down do my character defaults go.
Yeah.
Because I promise you, once you start digging into negative aspects of your behavior or the toxic parts of your personality, that thing goes down to places you wouldn't believe. You know. So admitting I had a drug problem was the easy part. The hard part is admitting that I'm not disciplined enough. Admitting that that my addiction was actually in many different areas of my life. Podcasts, became a podcast addict. Pornography, that was a big one. They were just, so the hard part isn't admitting that you have a problem. The hard part is discovering just how far down that problem goes.
Yeah.
So if you have a problem with, control, if you have control issues, it's easy to admit that. Well, for some people it's easy, but it's hard to come to the realization that your defects are in all aspects of your life.
Yeah.
And it's actually the hard part is also loving yourself, I would say. I think for me, loving myself had always been an issue because I was living in this weird paradox where self-loathing and ego travel together, which is weird because you'd think if you've got a big ego that you would love yourself. If you have a big ego, it's because you're insecure, because you're not facing aspects of yourself that you should be.
Yes.
So I think also that was a big issue, was just like when you become aware of your defaults, being painfully aware of your defaults is hard, but it's also it's liberating, and I think just knowing that your truth will come out is both the worst and the best thing, because you can't stop it. People are going to know I went to rehab. People are going to know I'm an addict.
Yeah.
But because you can't stop it, you don't have to chase it anymore.
So that's the liberating.
That's the liberating part.
Yeah.
But yeah, also just being more open to ideas has helped a lot. Being able, not always trying to prove someone wrong, but also just trying to learn from them. And then conspiracy theories. I love it. I thought, because I used to look into these conspiracy theories during active addiction. I thought, once I get into recovery, that would be a part of myself that would disappear. But no, it's actually gotten more. And the fact that now I am not distracted by things like pornography, by things like video games, by all this sin, I can actually see clearer now. I can actually see how evil works. I can see that everything in life is just, the only binary that matters is good and evil. Every other binary is a false binary. It's not about black or white. It's not about Christian or Muslim. It's not male or female. Those are false binaries. The only binary that matters is good and evil. And there's constantly a struggle against good and evil in the world. And that struggle happens within myself. And I let evil win for far too long. And when I talk about things like sin and evil, I'm not talking about being a psychopath or hurting people. Sin comes from the Greek word, it's an archery term, and it means to miss the mark. So when we sin, we are falling short. Evil, things like something like pornography is evil. It's not a special or treat that you can do sometimes. It's not like chocolate where we know it's kind of bad for us, but treat myself. It's evil. And you have to start viewing things through that lens of good or evil. Or obviously things do have good and evil within them, but as soon as you label something as evil, as soon as you say a demographic is evil, evil has won. As soon as you pinpoint evil to one thing, then evil has won, because then it's mastered itself. So that's how I've started viewing the world now, and it's helped a lot. I've got a lot of love for people.
And so you can identify evil quite easily because of what it brings up for you. Because you've been so indulging in evil for so long that you understand that way of being, or you understand, okay, this is going towards something that I'm moving away from now.
I would say I wouldn't necessarily say it's easy for me. It's easier.
Yeah.
Because I've realized that evil is contractual. You have to agree to evil. You have to take the ticket.
Okay. Yeah.
That's how evil works. That's how the devil works. The devil isn't just going to do evil things arbitrarily. The devil is going to make you agree to it.
Yes. There's always an enticing factor.
Exactly. You have to take the ticket.
Yes.
You have a choice to participate in evil.
Yeah.
And we take those tickets every day, and it's in the small things. Because it's things like pornography that doesn't seem evil, but it's free. So you're taking that ticket.
Yes.
Every time you open Instagram, you're taking a small ticket. Because distraction is evil. Because when you're distracted, then you can't see things for how they are. And that's another big thing for me, is I can distract myself very easily. But it's about trying to calm the mind, which is so hard for me. I've tried meditating. It's just it's not for me. So yeah, I'm rambling a bit now.
But it's good. We're unpacking more. When it comes to all of what you're talking about, it just makes me go back to the time where I was talking a lot of spiritual woo-woo stuff, and you were very concrete, knowledge-based, and so we've taken
materialistic.
Yeah.
Material realm.
Yeah. So we took sort of two different paths. But now I want to ask you, did we really take different paths? Or were we part of the same all along? Was this way of you realizing who you are in a practical and concrete way actually spiritual?
You know what? I can't regret anything I've done. And I think everyone takes a different path through life. But I think, you see, because I say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I think I was trying in my own way to be spiritual. But the fact that I didn't have a higher power, that I was so embedded within the physical world, the material realm, concerned about things that I could only prove by seeing, by quantifying, that's got a lot of arrogance to it. And I couldn't accept that there was anything greater than myself. Because I don't know, because I had too much of an ego.
Yeah.
And anyone who could conceive of things greater than themselves, for me, they just seem naive. they had wishful thinking, and they were just detached from reality. So being someone who was so concerned with like science and materialism and being able to prove things, and it's all about empirical data, all that did meant that I didn't have to keep searching for answers because I had them all laid out in front of me.
Yeah.
So it filled a gap, but it didn't allow me to grow. Yeah.
So what did allow you to grow then?
What did allow me to grow is being sober, firstly. Being honest, I still struggle with that. And being open-minded. The other thing is, so I'm high in trait openness. So I'm very open to new ideas, and I'm also very neurotic, which means that I will be always on the fringe, always, I'll always be looking for an answer, I'll always be developing it. And what that means is that sometimes I'll land up at conclusions which other people couldn't even fathom. They would find like ridiculous, and they would judge me harshly. So the fact that I believe things that a lot of people don't means that I've learned to wear a mask constantly, because if I tell the truth, then people are going to resent me for it. So I always had that filter, but now I don't even have that filter. Now I can talk about any of my beliefs. And if people don't like it, then they don't like it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try and offend anyone, but it's like, I don't believe we live on a spinning ball. I don't believe that.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a lot of things I could say.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna mask myself anymore just so that people will accept me.
Yeah.
Okay. But I want to ask you a few things now.
Okay. But first, when you ask me, so that's why I was just wanting to unpack that, because there was no spiritual practice or like meditation or something like that. It just happened, right? You realized there was a problem. You saw yourself in the world, and the way that it wasn't you didn't like, and so you accepted that, and you started doing things. You went to rehab. You said to yourself, you're going to be honest with yourself. You're going to be open, and those things changed your reality. Those things helped you grow, and that is a spiritual practice on itself.
Yeah, spiritual journey. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and so that's why I wanted to unpack that, because it's not woo-woo. You don't have to, be associated with something like yoga or meditation or plant medicine or whatever it is. At the end of the day, is as long as we're accepting who we are, we're opening up to our emotions, and basically owning ourselves, owning where we are at, and knowing that we're wanting to be better in any aspect of our lives, whether we want better business to grow, or whether we want to have happier relationships, or whatever it may be.
You see, I completely agree with you on that point, which is why I'm very fine with the fact that meditation is just not for me. I think that some of the most enlightened people in society come from places we would least expect. So I have an unproved theory that I think that guys who work as garbage collectors, that that occupation, for me, I reckon has the most enlightened people in the world. The biggest concentration of the enlightened people.
Why do you think?
Why do I think so? Because they got dealt a bad hand. Whether it's the fact that maybe they weren't born with as many talents or as intelligence, or whether they were born into a socioeconomic background that doesn't allow them to get as many opportunities. However you want to play it, they have to do some of the worst possible available jobs, which means that they're on that edge of, a lot of people would turn to deceit or turn to violence or turn to nefarious ways
Resentment.
of just like making a living. But they've taken on the burden of existence, and they are doing something that requires a lot of hard work. It requires you to also collect rubbish from every sector of society. So they also get to see, the different areas of society, like completely. Every street, they're picking up rubbish. So it's a thankless job, yet they do it. And a lot of people, I think, if they were in that position, they might turn to robbing people. They might turn to selling drugs. They just might turn to going on welfare. But the rubbish collector is out there sweating, earning an honest living at the highest cost. And you can apply it to like a miner too. And I'm not saying all rubbish collectors and all miners are, all spiritual gurus, but I think that people who earn an honest living, which is also a very hard living, I think they are on a very unique spiritual journey, and I think we can learn a lot from them. People who don't have as many opportunities, who have a hard hand, people who have immigrated as refugees from Zimbabwe, but they come here with a can-do attitude, a big smile, and despite all the odds they're facing, they still have an optimistic and positive outlook on life, and they don't have any resentment. That for me is the true spiritual journey, because it's embedded within a contemporary context. They don't have, they are living a spiritual life within a 21st century context. They don't have to learn ancient practices.
Yeah.
So
it's through their own experiences that they're learning.
Exactly. And I think that's just being aligned with honesty and being aligned with the good. And unfortunately, also some people, they just get tricked into evil. Again, they take the ticket, and some people will fall for evil much easier than others. And I don't know what you can amount that to. But just going back to your point, I think the spiritual journey, for me, if I had to sum it up, is how are you impacting the world? That's all it comes down to for me. How has your life impacted others? If it's positive, you've been on a spiritual journey. If it's negative, you've been serving someone else. And it's not God. Maybe yourself. Maybe the devil. It may be some rich CEO of a company you've given your life to. But you're not serving God.
And by serving God, you're serving mankind, which is giving back, because we're all God within us.
Yes, yeah, we all have the divine spirit within us. And I think it's a pity that we've become less religious as a society. And I'm not one to say any one religion's got the answer. Me personally, I think Christianity for me makes the most sense. But I think materialism, and I mean that in the truest sense of the word, as in the material world is all that exists. I think that's just the antithesis of the spiritual journey. It's not being a murderer. That's far on the spectrum. It's how attached are you to this world? You must be from this world, but not of it.
It's like going back to the Bible where it says not to worship any idols.
Exactly.
And that's what it's about. You're worshipping your phone, you're worshipping the things that you have, the clothes that you wear. Yeah. Yeah, that is a form of a religion.
Okay. Yeah, even American Idols, those are idols.
Yeah. No, thank you. And that sums up where you've been and where you are now, and it's quite amazing to hear that. And I've seen it through being with you on and off. We've gone our separate ways, but we've always come back to like a time like now where there's holidays and we seeing each other. And every time we come back, and there's always a little something different or a little something here, but it goes to show what the journey that you've been on, because you're not the same person that you were. And I can acknowledge that and praise that in a way, because it's amazing to see it. It's wonderful for me to see and to be a part of it, because there's not many people like I said to you earlier when we had a ceremony together, and I could express exactly what I went through. And even though I've expressed on the podcast and things, it still doesn't connect as much as it was between you and I, and how much you've seen through going through the journey. And it's quite a special thing to be able to have friendships, to have friends where you can be open and you can acknowledge each other's changes and growth and come to this place.
No, and I appreciate you having me on your podcast. And
after much asking and pleading.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I feel like I've been very scatterbrained and all over the place. But there's a lot.
There's a lot.
There's a lot.
Yes.
But also, yeah, I've also watched you grow as a person, which has also been very, it's been very satisfying, because I think I was detached from reality in a very specific way, but I think you were also detached from reality in a very specific way.
Yeah.
Yes. So we haven't, going back to, have we been on the same path? No, but have we crossed over and have our tributaries led into the same stream? Maybe. Are we all heading to the same river mouth? I hope so. So yeah, I think your question in the beginning really did take me off guard about how did you get here, and I'll just say I got here through a lot of mistakes. Yeah. A lot of mistakes.
Yeah. And struggle.
But life is tricky, but it's perfect. Life, even when life gets worse, it's worth it.
Hallelujah for that.
Hallelujah. Amen.
Well, thank you very much, Gav. I appreciate it. And I'm sure everyone can take home this authentic and true story, because there's a lot of lessons to learn here. There's a lot of truths within the story, and that is just about that all of us live a messy lifestyle. All of us have a way of being, but there are certain truths that can lead us to good. And I think the biggest thing that I took from this whole conversation was the good and evil, and the choices that we make, and to be able to be strong enough to just own the choices that we make, own everything in our reality, and begin to be aware of where are we making the choices. Are we making the choices towards evil, or are we making the choices towards good?
And then I just want to end with one thing, just building off what you said. One of the biggest things for me that I just want to mention quickly is shame. For me, the biggest thing was to realize that there's no use in shame. One can feel guilty, that's fine. Because when you feel guilty about something, you are owning up to the fact that you did something bad. But when you feel shame, then you're trying to own up to the fact that you are bad. And no one is bad.
Yeah.
Some of us have just partaken in evil. And it's okay to feel guilty about that. Learn from it. But take your shame and fuck off.
Amen. Thank you.
Thanks, man.